Election Day is 3 weeks away, but Iowa voters may begin casting ballots this week on Wednesday. We'll discuss the issues in Iowa's 2nd Congressional District with candidates Sarah Corkery and Ashley Hinson in this special live Iowa Press debate.
Funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends, the Iowa PBS Foundation, the Associated General Contractors of Iowa, the public's partner in building Iowa's highway, bridge, and municipal utility infrastructure.
Elite Casino Resorts is rooted in Iowa. Elite's 1,600 employees are our company's greatest asset. A family-run business, Elite supports volunteerism, encourages promotions from within, and shares profits with our employees.
Across Iowa, hundreds of neighborhood banks strive to serve their communities, provide jobs, and help local businesses. Iowa banks are proud to back the life you build. Learn more at iowabankers.com.
For more than 5 decades, Iowa Press has brought you political leaders and newsmakers from across Iowa and beyond. Live from Iowa PBS studios in Johnston, this is a special Iowa Press debate featuring candidates in the 2nd Congressional District. Here is moderator Kay Henderson.
For the next hour, we'll explore the views of 2 women who are running to represent Iowa's 2nd Congressional District. Let's take a look at the map and see what it looks like. The 2nd District encompasses 22 counties in east central and northeast Iowa. It includes the cities of Cedar Rapids, Grinnell, Mason City, Cedar Falls, Waterloo, Decorah, and Dubuque. The candidates are Republican incumbent Ashley Hinson, a former television journalist who represented the Cedar Rapids area in the Iowa House before being elected to Congress in 2020, and Democrat Sarah Corkery is a small business owner, community activist, and healthcare advocate. This is her first campaign for public office. Welcome to you both. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Kay.
Thank you.
Joining our conversation, Brianne Fahnenstiel, the chief politics reporter for the Des Moines Register, and Aaron Murphy, bureau chief for the Gazette in Cedar Rapids. Now, there are no time limits on your answers today, but we will ask you to be brief because we will move the conversation along because we have a lot of issues that we hear from voters and they want some answers. And also, let's just start with this first question, and again, be brief. What is the one issue that is your top priority? And give us one sentence for voters to explain why. Ashley Hinson, we'll begin with you.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you to Iowa PBS for hosting this debate tonight. And Sarah, thank you for coming. I think what's really critical is inflation. It's what I've been hearing from Iowans as I've been out traveling those 22 counties over the last term. It's affecting every Iowa family, and you just want to be able to live your life and get ahead and have some left over for your kids, just like I do. So that's my biggest priority.
Sarah Corkery?
At first, I want to say inflation's at 2%, which is a great number. But my biggest issue is access to abortion care. I believe women should be able to have this conversation with their doctors, and it should be a private medical decision like all other medical decisions. I've had cancer, and I can't imagine working on my treatment plan and my doctor saying, let me check with the government. So I believe it should be a private conversation between 2 people.
All right, let's get into some of these issues. Ashley Hinson, we'll start with you. You have said that, quote, securing the southern border and deporting millions of illegal immigrants, unquote, is your top priority in 2025. What would that mass deportation program look like?
Well, we have 10 million illegal immigrants that have come across the border under our Harris border czar situation that we've had the past couple of years. It's an absolute disgrace. It's impacting families here in Iowa. I just was at a small school district. You know, they've had several dozen new students come in that don't speak the language. We have a recent stop at a healthcare clinic that I was at. They've had to hire 3 new people just to deal with translating for these people coming into our communities, even here in Iowa. Look, I think we need to deport the dangerous illegals in this country first. That should be our top priority when we're looking at this crisis affecting our country. We have hundreds of thousands of people who are here who have criminal convictions. ICE just had to put out that data within the past few weeks. So I think that should be our top priority. Let's focus on getting getting these dangerous criminals out of our country. And then let's focus on making sure we're talking, after we secure our southern border, which needs to be a part of this conversation, the right amount of illegal immigration to this country should be zero. And let's focus on our visa programs and taking a look at those, but we must secure the border first.
So what are the logistics of the plan? Are we using the military? Are you asking local law enforcement to handle these deportations? How does this actually structured?
Yeah. Well, I think we would work with ICE. That's the agency that is designated to do this. They're doing it now, although they've been handicapped in doing their job by the Biden administration. They literally put out a memo in my first term 3.5 years ago that said we're going to selectively reduce these deportations. So we need to allow and empower ICE to do their job, because this is a problem that is truly affecting the American economy and American communities. Every community is a border community right now.
Sarah Corkery, the Des Moines Register Iowa poll found that immigration is a major issue of concern for Iowa voters across the state. Do you believe that the Biden administration has done a good job of handling border security?
First of all, I want to say there is a problem at the border. My opponent has said Democrats want to open border, and that's just not true. What we do want to do is go back to the plan that Republicans worked on with Democrats. That was a bipartisan deal that would have given us more border agents, and they approved this bill, would have given the presidency, whoever has it, the ability to shut the whole thing down. And who blocked that? Extreme conservative Republicans blocked that bill so that Trump would not get a win before the election. People are tired of this politics. If it's a true problem and you have the solution in your hands, we need to get it done. Also in Postal, there were ICE raids and a lot of people were deported. The white-collar criminal held accountable for that went to prison. And who commuted that sentence? Former President Trump. So he needs to be held accountable too. We know prices have gone up, and that's a problem. We also know 73% of people working in agriculture were not born here. So we need immigrants to help us build a stronger community. If we lost all of our immigrants in Iowa, we would be in big trouble.
May I respond really quick? When you look at immigration visa programs, we rely on legal pathways to come here, the H-2A and H-2B visa programs, which are absolutely crucial for agriculture and other sectors. That's the way we should be looking at how we get those workers and the workforce we need for Iowa agriculture in. The reason that bill didn't get a vote in the Senate, and it certainly didn't stand a chance in the House, is because it's still allowed for up to 1.8 million, about 5,000 a day of illegal immigrants to come into our country on asylum claims. And that's why that bill didn't stand a chance.
Despite that, your Republican colleague Joni Ernst called that the best chance we're going to have at meaningful immigration reform. Was that not a missed opportunity?
I just don't agree. I think the right amount of illegal immigration with what we've experienced in the last several years is zero. And this country has 10 million illegal immigrants that have come in here, more than 3 times the population of the state of Iowa. It's wrong.
Sarah Corkery, we also wanted to ask you, Vice President Harris has said that she supports making it more difficult to gain asylum and giving presidents more authority to close the border. Do you agree with that plan?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Vice President Harris, as part of her border policy, has said she supports making it more difficult to gain asylum and giving presidents more authority to address the border, to close the border. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree with that.
Well, I think it's about what are they saying is asylum. And this is exactly what we've seen happen and why we have programs that have had to be propped up now to deal with this massive influx. If they're training people on what to say when they're coming across the border, which is what the cartels are doing, I've been down there twice to hear directly from these Border Patrol agents, that's when the process becomes weaponized. Again, we need to focus on policies that actually worked to stem this tide of illegal immigration. That's building the wall, enforcing Remain in Mexico policy, ending catch and release, which, by the way, that bill in the Senate did not do anything to actually solve that problem. And then give our Border Patrol agents the resources that they need. Money's a part of this conversation, but the other part of it is the technology. It's automated surveillance towers, which is something that I've helped to deliver through my work on the Appropriations Committee.
Sarah Corkery,
Could I follow up with?
Yeah.
I was just say I met with a lot of farmers this summer over in the county fairs, and I remember one conversation in Benton County, and it was a farmer who said, "I'm having trouble getting hands in my field, people that help me to do this work," and he faces people that are immigrants, and he's having trouble sorting out who is who as well. So farmers need workers. Our large meatpacking plants need workers. If we all of a sudden deported everybody, the price of milk would go from $2 to $10. We would see massive increases in our costs because we rely on people to do a job. And today is Indigenous People Day. We remember we all, unless you are a Native American, we all came from somewhere. And we are a country built on that because we know diversity brings strength. My opponent tries to vilify anybody who is different than herself. We don't have to live in fear. We can deal with facts and solve problems. But when we go to fear, what we're doing is going to the primal part of our brain that says, be afraid because something is different. A quick story on that. My daughter and I are driving down the road, and we both saw what we thought was a black bear. We drove closer, it was a black garbage sack. But this brain is here to protect you in some ways. That was different, be scared, that's what its job is. But we've evolved past that, and we know just because people look different than us and came from somewhere else, they're not automatically bad people. And we are humans, and we know building the wall has not worked. My opponent wanted to put razor water in the wire to keep people from coming apart. That is not pro-life.
Shouldn't those farm workers be here legally, though?
Yes, we believe in all legal immigration. What we need to do is better give people more funding at the border so that they can get people through quicker. We need more resources, and we also need to say what has not worked. The wall has not worked. It has not fixed anything, and it was on our dime. Mexico did not pay for it. So we need to stop fear-mongering, and we need to start getting down to brass tacks and how we get things done.
Ashley Hinson, on Sunday, former President Trump said he, as president, would hire 10,000 more border agents and give them raises and bonuses. Mm-hmm. He also said other things about immigration. Do you think he has the right plan, and why is he not focusing on building the wall anymore?
Yeah. Well, I think it is a combination of those things, and you look at the bill that the House did pass, H.R. 2 last year. I think it does combine the border deterrent, which is the wall. It's a physical barrier that forces people to ports of entry. That's the point of the wall. Force these cartels so that they can't just drop off hordes of people and then sneak their drugs across. It forces them to a port of entry. It allows our agents to actually tackle these problems more directly. This is where the technology can be helpful for them too, because if they're using drone technology, they can track the bad guys, they can handle the crisis that they need to at that moment, and then move on to the next level of importance. Look, we do need more Border Patrol agents. We need more ICE detention beds. We've had both of those folks before our committee and asked them those questions, and they were begging for more help. The biggest question here, though, is how we're going to get those bodies down there to work in these places. Not everybody wants to work in law enforcement, and certainly they don't want to work for CBP if the administration is not supporting them to do their job.
Aaron?
All right, we want to shift now to a discussion of the abortion issue. Sarah Corkery, you have said codifying Roe v. Wade is the most important domestic issue in 2024. What specifically are you proposing there?
Right. I really think this should just be a conversation between a person and their doctor. Let's be clear. Abortion is about power and control over women's health. And many women don't even know they're pregnant at 6 weeks. And we also know it costs about $1,000 to get an abortion. We also know Iowa is the lowest in the state for OBGYN providers. They're being chased away because they don't want to be lawyers. They'd rather go somewhere else where they can just be doctors. I trust women to make this decision because it's heart-wrenching and serious. When I was pregnant with my son at 38 weeks, we both almost died. And so when Ashley sent a tracker to a Christmas party and they asked me about this, I leaned in. I told her the entire story about my birth with my son where we both almost died. And at 38 weeks, I couldn't imagine more of a tragedy. His name was Jude. He had a big sister and a crib. And you know what? He was most well-loved and wanted, and we're glad he lived. But if he had died inside of me, he would have had to come out. And that is the real facts. And that's why we need people to talk about this and understand the complexity. That's why it should not be legislated. If you say a number of weeks, then your next question should be, is the mother's life at risk? Is there a fetal anomaly that makes this incompatible with life? These are scary, terrible things. And so for my opponent to basically say people are having abortions up until birth and after is hurtful to those of us that almost lost our lives in childbirth.
And I understand that, but there's also a question of a legal structure here. So just to be clear, what are you specifically advocating for? Is it like the Minnesota law where there effectively are no restrictions, or is it like Roe versus Wade, which basically set a legality at viability, which is around 24 to 28 weeks?
Mm-hmm. I think it should just be between a person and a doctor. I'm going to push back on this because we've all talked about that one indicator. And Ron Steele interviewed me on the Steele Report. And he said, Sarah, is it 6 weeks? Is it 12 weeks? Is it 20? This is not a flippant conversation. And that's what it's become when we focus on one metric. And that one metric is not the end-all be-all. It's where this conversation has landed. And no men have lost their lives in childbirth. So that's why it should be between a doctor and a patient. And nobody should also tell you that the fetus you carry has more rights than you do. That's just wrong. And women don't like it. Abortion bans are not popular with Iowans. 60% of Iowans don't like it. even women don't like it. I wonder why. Because it's an economic decision. Deciding when and if to have children is one of the hardest financial decisions you will ever make. And if we're worried about inflation and paying our bills, adding more children is not going to help if they're not planned. And nobody is saying abortions are great, because we also know sometimes you need an abortion when you have an ectopic pregnancy that will never result in a baby. And it could go sepsis and kill you. Sarah and Decorah had 3 miscarriages, more at risk for ectopic pregnancy each time. And I'm proud to just say one thing, she just gave birth to baby Henry. So that's why I think it should be between a person and a doctor. And I do think Minnesota is safer. She's glad she lives 15 minutes from the Minnesota border.
Brianne Willett.
Ashley Hinson, your colleague, Congressman Zach Nunn, a Republican, said that he does not support a federal abortion ban. Would you support a federal abortion ban if it looked like the 6-week ban that Iowa has implemented, a version of which you supported in the Iowa legislature?
Well, I am pro-life, and I think what my opponent just said is very extreme. I do support exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother, and a fetal anomaly as well. I think being pro-life is really about doing more than that, and that's what I've really been focused on in Washington, D.C. And, you know, here in Iowa, we have our legislature and our governor who took action on this issue. Out in Washington, I've tried to focus on the whole of maternal health care, because that's what I think this is about. So I've been able to get resources back to help expand those birthing centers. Just visited one in Grinnell. We were able to secure in our bills that's going to help them to deliver up to 100 babies a year. Another way we've been able to be successful is by focusing on over-the-counter birth control access. We have 6 counties in this district that are considered maternal health care deserts, no access to a provider. So really this is about making sure that no matter what your zip code is, that you can have that access to care. So that's where I've really been focused. And it is a tragedy to lose a child. So stillbirth prevention has been a priority for me. I've worked with Iowans to make sure we were protecting life and making sure that women have the resources and the education they need to know when they need to go see a doctor. And so my stillbirth prevention bill was signed into law. It's a bipartisan bill, 408 to 3. It passed the House and was signed by President Biden this year.
So to be clear, would you support a federal abortion ban if it came before the U.S. House?
No piece of legislation will get my support without including those exceptions.
Well, let's talk about those exceptions. You say that those are very important to you. Mm-hmm. In January of this year, you co-sponsored the Life at Conception Act, mm-hmm. which says that life begins at the moment of conception. If that bill were enacted, it would ban abortions without exception. So where should Iowans believe you on this issue?
Yeah, well, that bill is about valuing life, which is my spectrum of work on this issue, which I just described. So again, no bill will receive my vote unless it includes those exceptions, and it'll go through the process like any other piece of legislation. I would ensure that before I took that vote on the
floor. So if that bill came before you, you would vote no on it?
As it is currently written, yes.
Then why did you decide to co-sponsor that?
Because it's about valuing life, and I think the most important thing here is about working with my colleagues to support a culture of life in Washington, D.C. Look, I understand not everybody's there. We need to have some protections in this country because life is valuable. I certainly don't want to support a culture of death like my opponent. That, I believe, is extreme, and you heard her say it right here. She does not believe in having a conversation about weeks. I would always rather err on the side of protecting life and trying to save as many lives as possible, and that's what I'll continue to do in Washington.
Can I follow up on that? This is what I believe. I believe Ashley Hinson would rather you be dead than have an abortion. Because 2 things, she signed the Life at Conception Act, which you're correct, does say no exceptions for rape, incest, or life of the mother. She says she supports the woman, but she'd rather they die than have an abortion. That's the truth. She also is a part of the Republican Study Committee, and also that said raise the retirement age, cut Social Security, Medicare, and it also included a national abortion ban with no exceptions. So she either doesn't understand what she signed, or she's playing politics with women's life.
Ashley Hinson, we have some other questions, but if you'd like to respond.
Yes. Well, you know, just because you're part of a caucus doesn't mean you agree with everything that caucus puts out. But what I think is important here is that my opponent clearly hits on a few issues that I think we'll probably be talking about tonight. Social Security, I hope we have a conversation about Social Security. My position has been clear and I've been consistent. I value life. I will continue to work on bills that help protect the spectrum of life, including those exceptions, which I have been very public about supporting, and my position on that has not changed. I support exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother.
Can I add one more thing just quickly?
We're going to move on.
We do need to move on. So much to get to. And this field doesn't just include a topic discussion about abortion specifically. A recent U.S. Supreme Court move blocked Biden administration regulations that would have required hospitals to perform abortions if they're needed to stabilize a patient's emergency medical condition. Is there a role, and Sarah Corkery, we'll start with you on this, is there a role for Congress in drafting a standard of care for women having a miscarriage?
No, the government needs to stay out of this. It should be a doctor and a patient discussion. Pure and simple.
Okay.
And my opponent also did finally say birth control is okay, even though she voted against the Access to Contraception Act. And the pill that she's put forward, Joni Ernst, does allow pills over the counter. But guess what? It's the least effective birth control because they have to put the least amount of hormones in it because there's no doctor overseeing this care. So not only they're giving us something, she's giving us the least effective form of birth control, which again can add to pregnancies that are unwanted. If she doesn't want abortions, we need to have more contraception.
And Ashley Hinson?
Yeah, I think states do a really good job of handling this. We have a great Iowa medical board here that is made up of doctors who decide what standard of care should be. What I want to see is a better liability environment for every doctor because we're struggling with getting providers here to Iowa. You talk about OBs being afraid of constant litigation. I know the state legislature took some action on that, but doctors shouldn't have to be in fear of providing a standard of care, and I think that's really, really important as we move forward for health justice.
What we have heard from those doctors is say they're worried about these kinds of laws, though, too, and even with those exceptions. Is that a concern that you share?
I think when we talk about exceptions for health of the mother, life of the mother, having a miscarriage is a medical condition. And I'm not a physician. I trust physicians to know when to intervene and know what that standard of care is. But that's where I think medical boards, like the one we have in Iowa, can decide what needs to happen for clarification there. I served in the Iowa legislature. If they came to us and said, hey, we want some clarification here, let's put it in code, I think that's the proper channel to move that forward.
Sarah Corkery, IVF is very expensive. President Trump has said if he's president, he will force insurance companies to cover it or the federal government will cover it. Is that the right move?
Yeah, I think IVF, we need access to IVF. And also, in the Life at Conception Act, that my opponent has literally put her name on in January, it does not protect IVF. So what she has signed doesn't. Although she says she supports it, we got to watch what she does. It's really important what people put their name on. And you should agree with it if you put your name on it.
Ashley Hinson, should the government force insurance companies to cover IVF or the federal government pay for it?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a very, very expensive procedure. We need to look at what that cost would be and make sure we're having a serious conversation about that. We're $35 trillion in debt in this country, and we definitely want to see people be able to grow and expand their families. And I'm proud to have done work to help support and expand IVF. I actually had one of my pieces of language get adopted into one of our appropriations bills this summer to look at how we're going to provide more IVF access for government employees. So I've already done work in this space, and I look forward to helping to expand and support IVF for women.
Lots of questions on lots of topics. Let's move on to taxes and the economy. The Trump-era tax cuts expire at the end of 2025. Ashley Hinson, do you have additions to that extension that you will seek?
Well, I think what's really important to protect are our small business tax relief that we saw pass in that 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I just finished another Main Street tour on my 22-county tour last week, visited 3 small businesses in Waukon. Look, they're already feeling the pinch of inflation because people are not buying as much as they maybe had resources to do before. That's the reality under Bidenflation and Biden and Harris's America. So I think it's really important that we protect Iowans from a tax increase next year, because if those are allowed to expire, the average Iowa family will see an increase of about 25%. That's the equivalent to about 7 weeks of groceries for an Iowa family, which we all know are tough to afford anyway. So we must do our part to protect those tax cuts next year.
Sarah Corkery, should those tax cuts be extended, or would you vote to allow those to expire and thus those tax rates to increase back to 2017 levels?
Let them expire.
So you would, which would result in a tax increase on?
For the rich.
Well, not just the rich, though. So all those tax cuts you would vote to expire.
Yeah. Well, I think she said the quiet part out loud here, which is the same thing that the Democrats in Congress
I don't say anything quietly.
This is important to consider. If you're watching this tonight and you're concerned about your bottom line at home at your kitchen table, the Democrats in Congress have said we don't have a spending problem, we have a revenue problem. My philosophy is this is your money, it's not the government's money. I want to see as much of it stay with you at home as possible.
Well, let's talk about Social Security. You've both mentioned that. Sarah Corkery, if Congress and the president do nothing right now, experts have projected that Social Security will be unable to pay out full benefits by 2035. What will you do if elected to make sure that seniors can continue receiving those benefits?
I have a very simple solution, and it's not my idea. It's been proposed before. But either eliminate or raise the Social Security Medicare cap tax that is tied to payroll. So currently, if you make up to $174,000, after that, that tax ends and your paycheck actually goes up. Well, I think those folks can continue to pay that. The reason they don't is they don't want to pay into a system without getting all their money back out of it, because they'll never receive more than that back in benefits. Well, I wonder why that number just happens to be the same number as the salary my opponent makes, $174,000, because the people who wrote the bill want to be sure they get their money back. Well, I want to make sure this stays solvent, and so we do need to make people pay more than others if they can afford more. Everybody, you know, my mom always said life's not fair. And it's not. And if you are luxury enough to have made that much money, you can pay a little extra. I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about people who need to pay their groceries and their job is laid off or shipped to Mexico. Our union brothers and sisters who are on the picket line, that's who I'm worried about.
Ashley Hinson, should we raise the retirement age for Social Security?
I think the solution here relies in, first of all, stopping the fear-mongering surrounding Social Security, and both sides are guilty of this. I think we need to take it as a serious issue because it's serious for seniors, right? Their COLA is not even covering their cost of living increase because we've seen so much inflation in this country. So this is a benefit that I want to protect. I will not support any cuts to Social Security going forward. I think the way we need to approach this, because it has been politicized so much, is to have a bipartisan commission, which has been proposed under Budget and Ways and Means Committee. Those are the two committees that actually handle this policy. We need to have them come to Congress with solutions, a whole table of solutions, and then make Congress vote it up or down. I think that's the way you take politics out of it, because if we do nothing by 2034, as you mentioned, we will see those benefits get cut by, I think it's over 20%. And I know Iowans and Americans cannot afford that.
I want to just jump in because also on the Republican Study Committee, it says to raise the retirement age, cut Social Security, Medicare, as I mentioned, the national abortion ban. Ashley agreed to those, so she's not telling the truth right now.
Do you support raising the retirement age?
I think we need to look at the whole smorgasbord of solutions. No, what I think is important here is we need to look, someone like my age, I'm 41 years old. I am 41 years old. I need to start saving for retirement earlier. I think the solution lies in making sure that our younger people are also saving for retirement because frankly, if we don't have millennials, the generation that is not saving money right now, if you look at the amount of money typically as the generation that they've got saved for money, it's the lowest in history. So I think we need to be having a conversation about all of those things. Again, my proposal is to look at any solution that's going to come across my desk that's going to make sure we don't see cuts to Social Security and we can preserve this benefit for years to come.
Vice President Harris has proposed having Medicare pay for long-term in-home care for seniors. Ashley Hinson, as you know, most Iowans want to stay in their own home as long as possible. And we know that that is less expensive care than putting someone in a nursing home to receive care. Is that a good idea?
I think it's definitely worth having a conversation about. I think when you look at, first of all, our caregivers are amazing people. They are spending hours and hours every single day taking care of other people. It's exhausting. It's backbreaking work in many cases, and it is really a labor of love. I've heard from so many caregivers. So I think we need to take a look at what options are available to help care for people in their own homes. I agree with you. It's less expensive. That sounds good to me. If it's going to be a less expensive venture for taxpayers, I'm happy to work on a policy that's going to make sure that's delivered in a way that we can afford to do going forward.
Sarah Corkery, critics of this proposal have suggested that, you know, Medicare can't handle it and it might impact other benefits like a reduction in prescription drug benefits. Is that a concern, or do you support the Vice President's proposal?
I support the Vice President for a very personal reason. We have a child with a disability, and so he receives respite services because he's on Medicaid, he's on a waiver. And so what we get to do is pick our own providers and employ even our relatives to take care of our son while we're out of town. And you know what? That is a win-win. So I think that's the model the caregivers are looking at. And I was interviewed by AARP, and we talked about how women take care of 4 generations of family, themselves, their parents, grandparents, and children. So women, this impacts greatly. And they ask, how can we fix this? And I say, make sure these caregivers are getting paid, quite simply, and keep them in their homes where people want to be. It costs less, it makes a lot of sense. So we've seen this work. This is a great idea.
Iowa is among the states that's suing the Biden administration regarding new rules for staffing in nursing homes. The nursing home industry says it will force some of them to close just because there's a staffing shortage. They don't have the people available to hire. Is that a concern?
Yeah, we need to pay those folks more. Some of them are still operating at the ratios under emergency systems back in the pandemic. And the people doing the job tell me, this is too hard. We need more people to help us. These ratios are wrong. And so they are wanting wanting to leave this industry. So we need to pay them more, work on retention, work on making sure we incent companies to help. But really, it needs to be solved in that way.
How do we pay them more without raising the cost for families?
Well, I think we need to look at the minimum wage that hasn't been touched in a long time. We know minimum wage is $7.25, but everywhere you go, the shops all say $15, $16, $17 an hour. So would you rather work at McDonald's or be a caregiver? If you can make more money at McDonald's, you'll probably do that. So we need to find ways to pay them more to keep them in that, because we know our aging population is just going to grow and grow, and they need to be taken care of because they deserve it. They've earned it.
Ashley Hinson, what are your thoughts on the nursing home conundrum?
This is another example of a one-size-fits-all policy that didn't take into account the situation like what we have here in Iowa. We've got a lot of these rural healthcare providers and rural nursing homes that are struggling to recruit talent and keep people employed. And what I don't want to see happen is a rule like this that puts them out of business, and then where are those people going to go? I worry about the kind of down the river when this is implemented. What's this going to actually mean for these, in some cases, small business owners who are running these operations? So I think we need to be very deliberate about it. I think it comes down to the worker pipeline. So that's why a lot of the work I've done in Washington is focused on getting more caregivers in the pipeline, making sure we're incentivizing work-based learning, making sure people have educational options that can churn out people for the workforce. I mean, our healthcare heroes got a lot of burnout in the last couple of years during COVID. So we need to make sure we're providing the education and the tools necessary to make them want to work in the field again.
Sarah Corkery, let's turn to foreign policy. The U.S. is sending weaponry and humanitarian aid and personnel to Israel. Should that continue?
I think it needs to be looked at. So we know what the situation in Israel is quite complicated. We know anything revolving religion and land is going to be. So we need to make sure, while we support Israel, we may not support what its current leadership is doing. So we need to, at the end of the day, make sure aid gets to people, innocent women and victims and children, because that's the right thing to do. We should focus on that and help with some ways to find a two-state solution there and have really smart negotiators go in and help. Like I said, it's not going to be solved overnight. This has been going on a long time. But should we send aid? Yes. And making sure people can defend themselves and making sure it's going towards women and children and innocent lives? Yes.
Ashley Hinson, the Biden administration is not only sending a weapons system, but they're sending personnel into Israel. Is that the right move?
Yeah. Well, Israel absolutely has every right to defend itself, and I think we're taking a defensive posture there, right? That is defensive anti-rocket equipment. So I think that's a key differentiator here. They're not escalating. That's so that they can defend themselves. And I think when you look at Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, these terrorist organizations that are funded by Iran, we are in this position because of the Biden administration's failures on foreign policy. Under the Trump administration, we saw great progress because of the Abraham Accords. I actually had a chance to travel to Israel about 2 years ago. I was actually there when Russia invaded Ukraine. So talk about foreign policy kind of intersecting while I was there. But, you know, we actually traveled to Ramallah and met with the Palestinian leadership as well. They do not want a two-state solution because they are still intent on destroying Israel. Hamas broke that ceasefire last October 7th, and I think Israel has every right to be able to continue to defend itself, and we need to eradicate these terrorist organizations that are, again, funded by Iran, fueled by $6 billion that this administration unfroze. We know the money's fungible, and we can tell how they're using it.
Ashley Hinson, there is a sizable portion in your party that is ready to cut off aid to Ukraine and its defense and its war against Russia. Are you ready to close the door and whittle down that support?
Yeah. I wish we were never in this situation to begin with. I have voted for some aid. I've voted against other packages. My biggest concern with this is I don't want to see American boys and girls going to go fight Russia in Ukraine. I want to deter that as much as we possibly can. I have a 13-year-old boy, right? I think about what's going to be happening in the next couple of years and could he end up in a war? And so it's going to be everything I can do possible to deter that war. I think we're in this position again because of President Biden's weakness on the global stage. Vladimir Putin is a thug and he cannot be allowed to win this war. So I'm hopeful that President Trump can come in and put an end to this war through a negotiation process so Congress doesn't have to spend any more taxpayer money to fight that war over there.
Can I jump in here?
Well, yeah, but I was going to ask, and feel free to add to it, but do you feel that there should be any constraints on aid to Ukraine, or should the U.S. be in unconditional support there?
No, it should be for defense. And I want to point this out. Ashley has called me a rubber stamper, and I take offense to that because I've never held public office. It doesn't make sense. I've never rubber stamped anything. And if anything, I'm not bought and sold by either party. We didn't receive much money from the Democratic Party because they focused on other regions this year. And we knew that, but we are fighting anyway. And I'm not a rubber stamper. Ashley actually sent money to Ukraine because she's never voted against her party. And when they told her to do that, she did. And if you want to meet a candidate who got mad about that, Jody Puffett. She should be at this debate right now, but she didn't meet the criteria, but she's an independent in this race. And her number one reason was because Ashley finally broke down and sent money to Ukraine. And she thinks we should solve all our American problems first. Well, I disagree. I'm glad we sent money to Ukraine. But if you like that idea, go check out Jody Puffett.
I want to move us along. After the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, bipartisan majorities in Congress passed some gun control measures. Ashley Hinson, you voted against the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. You said you had concerns about due process. Are there any gun control measures specifically that you would support?
Yeah, I'm signed on to a few of them. I'd love to talk about those. You know, when you look at making sure we look at the root of this problem, you cannot legislate away hate. I think very clearly people who wake up with creating this chaos and killing their fellow students, that's mental illness, and we need to look at the root of that problem as well. So I'm focused on making sure law enforcement have the tools that they need to actually control, have better communication, making sure those dollars are getting to schools so that they can be hardened, making sure that we're keeping guns out of the hands that shouldn't have them. The Stop 2 Act is what I would point people to as a good example of a piece of legislation that I think focuses on that. We have a background check law in place already. That wouldn't have stopped, and nothing in that bill would have actually stopped the shooter in Uvalde from getting the weapons that he had. So again, no law is going to deter people who have hate in their mind from actually going to a school and perpetrating these terrible crimes. But what we can do is making sure we're getting the resources to our schools. I've signed on to the Kids Care Act. Actually, it passed as part of a bigger package of bills a couple of years ago. But that is specifically aimed at getting resources to our juvenile offenders so that we make sure we're targeting them where they are so that they don't reoffend and get on a path to a place where they're going to be perpetrating violence. So those are the places where I'm focused on policy decisions.
So separate from funding for mental health or school safety, are there measures focused specifically on guns that you could see yourself supporting?
I think we need to be very careful about this because I'm not going to demonize legal gun owners, and they continually get demonized in this conversation. Kamala Harris supports a gun buyback program. I'm sure my opponent supports that as well. I think that's wrong, and I think that's the wrong policy. I think we need to focus on the root of this problem, which is making sure our schools are safe. I put my kids on the school bus every single day. I want every kid to have a school that's safe and have a good education, and I think that's where we need to focus our efforts, is on making sure that we're looking at the root of the problem, which is mental health.
Brianne,
Could I jump in?
Brianne has a question.
We've got a question for you on the same issue. Some jurisdictions have begun charging the parents of mass shooters. Do you believe that's an approach that could work on this issue?
Yes, and I want to say, on guns, we can do something. It made me very angry when she said there's nothing we can do to legislate away this type of hate. And I thought, yes, you are the exact person who's supposed to be doing something. And she should have voted for the Bipartisan Safer Communities bill, because that would have gained more mental aid support in our schools. And she also mentioned her bus driver who takes her kids to school. Well, I've got a friend named Rick Niemeyer who drove her kids to school in the bus, and he sat at Kirkwood Community College with his hand in the air for over a half an hour, and Ashley refused to take his question. So I've started to call her Absent Ashley, because she tours around 22 counties, but Democrats cannot get in front of this lady. I have tried, and we get about 2 hours notice to where she'll be, and then they stack the room and only take questions from those that they want to. It's not right. If you represent Northeast Iowa, you represent all 800,000. I went to the Club 45 Club in Decorah, and I met with Republicans, because I know if I'm elected, when I'm elected, we're going to represent all. And we're going to bring joy to this conversation, and that's what people like.
May I respond briefly? Yes. I've done 42 in-person public town halls since I took office. I do a weekly press call with many of you. By the way, I don't screen those questions at my town halls. I answer questions from everybody. I had a Hamas protester in the front row of my town hall in Dubuque, and I answered
What about
questions.
Rick Niemeyer?
So I've public notice for all of my town halls. They go out in my newsletter. If you don't follow my newsletter, I encourage you to, because I will continue to do public town halls and events. I think accessibility and transparency is what I've really prioritized as the congressman
I
for
need
this
to
district.
speak up on that.
And I've done more than, including those town halls, 450 stops in the district since I took office.
Yeah, again, we need to move on.
I just want to say, Ashley voted against the bipartisan infrastructure project, and then she takes credit for it. If we can't trust her with bridges, we cannot trust us with our lives.
We need to move on. We want to talk about education. Sarah Corkery, I wanted to ask you, you have been very critical of the level of state funding here in Iowa for public schools and the state's private school assistance program. Why have you centered your campaign for Congress on what are local issues?
Yeah, I have two really great answers to that. First, I live in Iowa. I'm proud to live here. I pay my taxes here. My kids go to public school, including my kid with a disability. Thank God for the Americans with Disabilities Act, because he's gotten a great public education. But what I don't like is that at a state level, we're only funding schools at about 2.5%. We've fallen way, way behind, and it makes me mad that we have $2 billion of surplus in Iowa, and they sit on that. My second reason is called Project 2025. I believe that is the Republican playbook, even though my opponent denies it. And number one thing they say is get rid of the Department of Education. So it is a federal issue. If they're going to get rid of the Department of Education and possibly the Americans with Disabilities Act. Project 2025 is called Everybody's Out for Yourself. Good luck. No safety nets. Even taking away farm subsidies and farm insurance. My opponent denies knowing anything of this, but it's a 900-page playbook that's been handed to Trump and been handed to my opponent, and they intend to use it. She's slippery on her words, but watch what she does.
So is there anything as far as federal policy that you're advocating for?
Keep the Americans with Disabilities Act, keep the Department of Education, please.
Ashley Hinson, would you like to respond to any of that for?
I think it's interesting we only started hearing about Project 2025 after President Biden's totally disastrous debate back in June. Look, my focus for next year is going to be on the issues that I've heard from Iowans at those 450 stops about. You talk about ag policy. I hope we have a conversation about that. I'm the candidate at this table who is endorsed by Iowa Farm Bureau and Iowa Corn, so the farmers in the state are behind me. We need to get the Farm Bill done. That's a priority for me after we get back after the election. I just actually led 140 of my colleagues in a letter to our House leadership to try to get that bill across the floor. That's a bipartisan bill. We need to move forward on that.
We took another break.
My opponent seems to not be listening to what I'm saying here, but I'm a huge supporter of agriculture. You talk about a dairy farm, the Robert Horse Dairy. I just was there a few weeks ago, hearing about the challenges that our dairy farmers are facing. Right now, our corn prices and our bean prices, less than $4, less than $10. They're not even breaking even on those prices. So as they're out harvesting right now, we're going to do everything we can to continue to focus on supporting those priorities.
What are the two things holding together?
Ashley Hinson, you have criticized Linn-Mar school policy to support transgender students. We know from data that transgender youth are 2 to 2.5 times more likely to suffer from depression or commit suicide. What do you say to Iowa transgender students who feel unsafe at school, or their parents who send those students to school and worry about them?
Yeah. I want every child to have a safe place to go to school. And my criticism of the school board and those policies was that they shut parents out. That was my concern with that, is they are saying as a parent, and I have 2 boys in that public school district, they're saying, okay, well, you have to sign this permission slip for your kid to take Tylenol at school, but we're going to pass a policy that allows them to change their gender at school at age 12 and not tell the parents about it. And I thought that was wrong. I think parents should be in the driver's seat of kids' education. That's why in Washington, D.C., what I've prioritized for education is the Parents' Bill of Rights. It's 5 provisions that make sure parents are in that driver's seat and know what their kids are learning about at school. When it comes to the Department of Ed, you bet there's some concerns there. Any person who has a child who's college age or going into college, look at the disastrous rollout of the FAFSA program this year. People have not gotten the college aid they need as a result of that. Not to mention the Department of Ed under this administration is trying to erase girls' sports under Title IX. I think that's wrong, and that's where I think my pushback comes on those types of policies.
Do you want to see the Department of Education shuttered?
Well, I think there are some serious questions. I think we don't need to shut them down. I don't think we need to shut them down. I think we need to haul them before our committees and ask them serious questions about their absolute failures. At the end of the day, what I want to make sure is happening is that kids in this school district that my kids are in around the country get the best education possible. That's why I do support educational choice, because you look at many of these school districts, and Iowa's pretty lucky. We have great schools here in Iowa. We have great public schools, but this is about choices for parents and, again, making sure they're in the driver's seat. Education is the great equalizer, and I want to make sure everybody has that opportunity.
Sarah Corkery, a carbon capture pipeline is.
Can I respond on that really quick? We are not number one in education, but we need to go back to number one in the ed. We are not number one. We need to go back to being number one in education. Thank you for letting me get that in.
A carbon capture pipeline is going to be proposed to run through your district. Is that a project you support?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
I believe eminent domain should be used for public good, and I don't think this is for public good. This is for corporate greed. At a state level, we can decide if we have them and where they go. At a federal level, we can just have conversations around safety. And I talk to farmers where these pipes are going to go through, and they're worried about the rocks that come up every spring, and those rocks busting one of those pipes and leaking that. And if it's near a school, there's no oxygen. Cars won't run. This is dangerous, and can't buy insurance to even help themselves if a disaster happens. So Iowans do not like it, so I do not support it.
Ashley Hinson, do you support the project and the tax credits at the federal level that are sort of fueling this?
Yeah. Well, I think when you look at the tax credits specifically, my focus in D.C. has been on making sure that we have innovation in the energy sector. And that's really what the federal role is here, is to look at, for instance, the 45Z and 45Q tax credits. They're also used for enhanced oil recovery in Texas. So I want to make sure that we're giving opportunities for people to produce energy, all of the above and all of the below. And that is my approach to energy production. Look, I'm leery of eminent domain. I don't like it. I think we absolutely need to have a conversation, and that's happening at the state level right now, about what protections may be needed going forward. I think it's not a black and white issue with this case, because you're hearing from people who are concerned, rightfully so, about their land and protecting their most valuable asset. But then when we talk about, as I mentioned earlier, Aaron, the corn prices that are at less than $4 right now, if you look at where things are going, I want to make sure that our producers actually have a market. If we have an administration like this one where they haven't prioritized trade and we don't have those new markets emerging, I want to make sure that we do everything we can at the federal level to preserve that. That's why I continue to focus on year-round E15. I think that's the way we help support the industry.
Ashley Hinson, you voted after the 2020 election to certify the results in Congress. If Donald Trump were not elected, would you still vote to certify the election in 2024?
Yes. I think it's important that we do our job as members of Congress, and I think Iowans rightly have some questions, and I've heard from so many of them about election integrity, and that is important that we have those conversations. I think we've done a really good job here in Iowa of making sure that it is easy to vote and hard to cheat. I support voter ID. I think that's a great policy. Democrats in Congress in my first term tried to outlaw voter ID in their legislation under Speaker Pelosi. I think that's the wrong policy. We need to make sure that Americans can trust in their elections and trust that the outcome of those elections is fair.
Sarah Corkery, if Democrats lose this election, what will you tell your supporters?
I will say, be kind. Be kind, because we have to find a way forward. And, we need to find some common ground. And me going to the Club 45 was a start. We didn't agree with each other, but I came in and said, I'm not here to change your mind, and I'm here to listen. And that's a first stop. I have not seen my opponent go to any Democratic office and have that conversation.
There is a proposal that is sort of working its way through the court system regarding TikTok. Sarah Corkery, should TikTok be banned in America?
No.
Why not?
I think if you're going to vilify one, you need to vilify all. We all know social media is bad for our young children, that it hits their dopamine brains. But the data gathered in TikTok is not going to be used from China to cause harm. It's just not. It's a fear tactic. We've asked them to diversify their ownership. We'll see if they do. But I believe currently it will end in January if they don't follow through. I think that's the wrong choice. It is a free speech. It's a fun platform. And I say this, TikTok is a mirror. If you open it up and look at something, you don't see what you like, that's on you. I see puppies and kittens, and that's what it's for. It's an algorithm. It's new and innovative, and I think we need to be a part of these conversations, not block people from accessing things.
Ashley Hinson, what's your view on TikTok?
China is the CCP is very, very dangerous and is a very real threat to the United States. And that's why you saw such a bipartisan vote on that, is because members of Congress who have access to that information about the real threats coming from China see TikTok as the mechanism for them to spy. It's like a spy balloon on 200 million American phones. When we look at what's at stake, it's not just the algorithm that they're showing us different videos than what the Chinese kids are seeing, I can tell you that. But what it comes down to is look how quickly they weaponize weaponize that platform. The second we put that bill out in Congress, they put a requirement that you had to call your representative in order to be able to sign in. So my office, and I actually got on the phone and started taking questions from people as they were calling in. Imagine if they used that to weaponize on Election Day and say elections have been canceled. A lot of people look to social media platforms for their news these days.
They do that on any platform.
So what if they take that very, very seriously? So I think that's what's at stake here. Is this is a very real threat. We need to eliminate that threat. And if they divest from the CCP, from the Chinese-owned company or Chinese-connected company, then this won't be an issue and people can continue to watch their dogs and their cats on TikTok.
Ashley Hinson, wanted to ask you something. You raised a concern about the postal delivery during a recent House hearing. We're coming up on an election. 4 years ago, a lot of people voted by mail during the pandemic. Can Iowans depend on the Postal Service to deliver their absentee ballots on time?
Yeah, I believe so, and I would encourage everybody, if you can go watch that hearing. We had Postmaster General DeJoy before us a few weeks ago. That was actually my idea. I had seen a news story about potential delays in mail. He stressed, get your ballots in the mail 7 days before they need to get back, and I think that's really critical. Every state has a different law of what that absentee deadline is. Obviously, absentee voting starts here in Iowa this week. Ballots will be mailed out, I think, Wednesday, I think it is, and we just need to make sure if you're going to vote absentee, get it in the mail as soon as you can, because it needs to be, you need to account for about 7 days to get it to the auditor's office.
Sarah Corkery, small businesses also say they can't necessarily depend on the Postal Service anymore. What's Congress's role in all this?
We need to fully fund the post office. I stood on a line the other day with my union friends that work at the post office, and we need more resources. What they're trying to effectively do is say it's fine if mail goes slower in the country than the city, and we know that's not okay. People rely on mail for their medication, for their voting, so we need to strengthen this and trust them to do their job. I believe, others are trying to reduce their resources to make it harder. We need to make it easier. And you know what we should be afraid of in this state? Cancer. We have the second highest cancer incident rate in the nation and the only state with an increasing rate. I've had breast cancer twice. I wore this today on purpose. It's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And my opponent does not support people who have cancer. I begged her to sign the Metastatic Breast Cancer Access to Care Act for my friend Cassie Beal. And she said no. She said it's too expensive. If I start helping people with breast cancer, I might have to help others with cancer, and I don't want to. That is not somebody that should be representing Northeast Iowa when we know we have a cancer problem. We know our water is not clean. We know we need to do better because we want people to live here and move back. And I don't know if my kids, I want to live here if we have such a high cancer incident. So I wonder what she has to say about that.
Ashley Hinson.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be on that bill whether you would ask me to or not. I am a co-sponsor of that bill. And I, with every piece of legislation, I go through a process in my office to take a look at the merits of a bill, the price tag of a bill, because that's what taxpayers sent me there to do, is to look at potential costs and potential impact. When you're talking about, we had a robust conversation about Social Security. We're talking about insolvency of that program. When you look at the pot of benefits there, anytime you add a covered condition, it can impact the full body of available benefits. So I just want to make sure everything that I do, I go through that judicious process because I do believe in helping people, and I want to make sure that we do it the right way in a responsible way.
I just have one question. Why did she sign it on the day I joined this race?
The most important thing here, and we are in Breast Cancer Awareness Month.
Why did you sign it the day I entered this race?
I just scheduled my mammogram for, actually, I'm going to go on Election Day because I've got to get it done too. So I'm focused on prevention, and I think it's everybody knows someone who's experienced breast cancer. I have personal friends who have experienced breast cancer. And what we need to be focusing on is preventative care. So I've co-sponsored legislation as well to help support mammography vans. I just toured one. Gunderson Health Clinic has one that was over in Lansing. So talk about making sure those resources are going to places in rural. I mean, Lansing's a very small community right on the Mississippi River, right? And so making sure that women, no matter what their zip code is, can access that preventative care as a priority.
I just have one follow-up, please.
I want to ask about the Farm Bill. You mentioned cancer rates. Ryan Melton, who is also a Democrat running in the 4th Congressional District, says the Farm Bill should be refashioned to address the amount of farm chemicals that are being applied to land. Do you agree?
Yeah, I don't think we need to tell farmers on how to do their jobs, but I think we need to all agree on the end result. And we need to reduce chemicals. So smarter technology that doesn't spray them near water is happening. We need to do more of that. We're losing our topsoil at record speeds. It took us 10,000 years to build this up. At our current rate, the allowable rate of soil erosion is 5 tons per acre per year. At that rate, Northwest Iowa won't have topsoil in 100 years, and Northeast Iowa will not have topsoil in 50 years. This is serious. We need to tie farm subsidies to making sure we improve our climate. And we all agree, farmers want clean water and dirt too. So we need to work together. But yes, I do agree.
We haven't much time left, but Ashley Hinson, in regards to the Farm Bill, the House Ag Committee passed a bill that includes a $30 billion cut to SNAP. Do you support that?
It's not a cut, first and foremost. I think that's been some misconceptions about that. We saw with the Thrifty Food Plan and how that pricing was set up a few years ago, the adjustment was made and it was, I would say, off kilter. So I think what we're trying to do is make sure not only are those benefits, because I support SNAP, it's a very important program. I just recently was at the Haycat Food Reservoir talking about how we make sure we get this Farm Bill across the finish line, because it does still support SNAP. It's really crucial that we get people the benefits they need, and I will continue to support the SNAP program. You talk about the Farm Bill. My Precise Act's included in the Farm Bill. That's a bill that would actually focus on precision agriculture equipment and making sure more farmers can get that. That is my legislation included in this Farm Bill. And my Drought and Land Stewardship Bill is focused on flood resiliency and drought resiliency. We experience both here in Iowa, so my language is included in the Farm Bill. I'm advocating to get it across the finish line, and it is a bipartisan bill in the House. I hope we can bring it to the floor soon.
We have just 2 minutes left. I'll give you each a last minute. Congress doesn't really seem to a lot of observers to be a great place to be right now. Sarah Corkery, why would you want to be a member of Congress?
Because I've almost died twice, and I quit my corporate job to pursue this because I think we can create policy changes that help people's lives. So specifically, my opponent is bought and sold by her party and the NRA. I'm not. I will be beholden to the 800,000 people and my thoughts on what we can do to make this a better world. I really think this. We are all just put on earth to make it a little better for each other and a little easier. And we need to bring joy back to this conversation so people aren't tired of the conversation and we can get work done. When I was at corporate America, I underspent my budget by $1 million the last 2 years. I know how to pinch a penny. I'm not your typical Democrat. I'm more moderate. This is your chance, independents and moderates, to vote in somebody that will represent you, and that's me.
Ashley Hinson?
Well, thank you again for hosting the debate tonight. I appreciate the robust conversation we've had. Look, I want to go back because I value taxpayers. I value rural America, and I want to keep fighting for safety and security in our communities. And there is a lot of chaos and dysfunction in Washington, D.C. right now. There are times I go back up to my office and I'm like, oh, what next, right? So I like the fight. I like making sure that I'm at the table for Iowans. And I think there's so much more to do to protect the way of life we have in the United States. And here in Iowa, we're so lucky to be Iowans. Again, I got into this fight for 2 reasons. I'm a mom to Max and Jax, and I'll keep fighting for them and for every Iowa family. The Biden-Harris agenda has been tough on American families the last 4 years. We certainly cannot afford 4 more years of it. And I will continue to push back on policies that are taking our country in the wrong direction while working with anyone. Bipartisanship and balance is how we get things done.
Thanks to both of you for being here this evening. This is, by the way, the first of 2 Iowa Press debates on Iowa PBS. Next Monday, October 21st, we'll question the candidates in Iowa's 1st Congressional District, Democrat Christina Bohannon and Republican incumbent Marion Miller-Meeks. You can watch that live at 8 p.m. on air and online. And if you missed any of tonight's debate, you can watch it online at iowapbs.org. For the entire crew here at Iowa PBS, thanks for watching.
Funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends, the Iowa PBS Foundation, the Associated General Contractors of Iowa, the public's partner in building Iowa's highway, bridge, and municipal utility infrastructure.
Elite Casino Resorts is a family-run business rooted in Iowa. We believe our employees are part of our family, and we strive to improve their quality of life and the quality of lives within the communities we serve.
Across Iowa, hundreds of neighborhood banks strive to serve their communities, provide jobs, and help local businesses. Iowa banks are proud to back the life you build. Learn more at iowabankers.com.